Are streaming.
All right, at 5:02, we will call the September 1st meeting of the Quality of Life Committee to order. If we could get a roll call, Jamie Ray, that would be awesome.
Councillor Cassett,
Here.
Councillor Villarreal,
Present.
Councillor Garcia,
Present.
Councillor Rivera,
Here.
and Chair Romero Worth.
I am here.
We have
Terrific.
a quorum.
We move to approval of the agenda. We have one change tonight. We are pulling item 7A. It's being worked on some more. It was heard at finance. And there are a number of questions and things that need to happen there. I don't know if there are other changes from the committee or from staff. Now would be the time to make them. If not, is there a motion?
Move to approve is amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended. If we could get a roll call again on the approval.
Councillor Cassett,
Yes.
Councillor Villarreal,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Rivera,
Yes.
and Romero Worth.
Yes. All right,
Motion
on
passes.
to approval of the consent agenda. Are there changes to the consent agenda from staff? Jamie Ray? No.
I don't have any changes to the, Madam Chair. I have no changes.
Okay, or Director Brown. Terrific. Are there items that the committee would like to hear?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Councilor Rivera.
I was going to pull item 7A.
But
and
we
I'm
already,
thinking- Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about how to, so I can't look back at the finance committee or I can look at the minutes and try to figure out what finance committee asked. Because the minutes don't have that kind of information. I guess I could go back and look at the video of it. Is there a synopsis that somebody can give as to what kind of questions or concerns the finance committee had?
it was a long discussion. It is queued now on I'm told that they queue it and they timestamp it so that you can go back to the meeting agenda and play just that section, but it was a lengthy conversation and there were a number of questions. And I don't think I can summarize them and be fair.
All right, I'll go back and look at the YouTube. I was just hoping that, because we can't look at it on the minutes and get a accurate synopsis. So I'll go back and look at YouTube. Thank you.
Okay. Are there items that the committee would like to pull? Other than that, Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 7C is in cat as a follow-up from our finance committee meeting.
Okay,
Thanks.
C as in cat. And I don't know why oh, there we go. I'm trying to get my panel so I can see virtual hands. All right, I don't see any other hands. Is there a motion to approve as amended?
Move to approve is amended.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as amended. Is there can we get a roll call on that, please?
Cassett,
Yes.
Councillor Villarreal,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Rivera,
Yes.
and Chair Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, we're on to approval of the August 18th minutes. Are there changes to the minutes from staff? Hearing none, changes from the committee. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the August 18th minutes for the Quality of Life Committee. Can we get a roll call, please, Jamie Ray?
Councillor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
and Chair Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Terrific. So now we have a few presentations. And I'm not sure, is Tomas Rivera in our attendee room, or is somebody else giving that presentation tonight? I don't see him in, oh wait, Chainbreaker Collective is in the attendee room. That may be Tomas. Can somebody?
Kathy Garcia is presenting, I believe.
Okay. And I don't see her in, so I need her promoted as well, please. Kathy Garcia. Okay. Tomas, you're upside down. Anything you can do about that? I guess we could all turn upside down.
Sorry about
Oh,
that.
there you are.
Every like third Zoom call it does that. It's very embarrassing. I apologize.
No, that's a trick I don't know. You'll have to teach us. That could be kind of fun.
Do we get everybody in?
Yeah, I think we're good now, Joe. Thank you.
All right, good.
All right, so I think we have our presenters here. We have tonight with us, and I'm just trying to pull the whole caption, a presentation on the report entitled Beyond Recovery, Policy Recommendations to Prevent Evictions and Promote Housing Security in Santa Fe, Part 3. And Tomas Rivera is here. He's the executive director of the Chainbreaker Collective. And Tomas, I'm going to let you take it away and introduce Kathy and her role, and just turn it over to you. So thanks for being here tonight.
Great. Thank you, Counselor, and thank you, Counselor Romero-Worth and our Chair Romero-Worth and Counselors. We're happy to be here today. Yeah, I'm going to just turn it right back over to Kathy, who's going to do the presentation on the report.
Great. And can you, Kathy, just tell us what your title is? Are you with Chainbreaker? Are you contracted by Chainbreaker? Like, just give us your context.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Kathy Garcia, and I am a community organizer here with Chainbreaker, and I am on full-time staff.
Terrific. I just want the public to know, should they be watching or go back and watch? It's important that they know who you are. I know you've been before our committee before, and really appreciate it. You always do a nice job, so thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Chairperson Romero-Worth. And thank you again to all of the counselors and all of the folks present for inviting us here to speak about the report. I'm going to go ahead and begin screen share. We do have slides that are kind of, we've been using to kind of help explain what's been going on and how we've gotten all of that. And here we go. Yeah. That is all there. Okay. So yes, we have been working on a variety of reports. We are presenting today information on the third in a series of reports, third and final. The first report really described this housing situation before the pandemic started. Our second report was very heavy in data analysis of the rate of eviction filings that were actually filed in the state of New Mexico and in the city during the time period of 2020, during which the various eviction moratoria were in place. Of course, we are here to share what we've learned from those investigations because we feel that we've come up with a list of policy recommendations in collaboration with other organizations, members of city council, members of city staff. Some of you folks will be very familiar with some of the recommendations we've made here. And so that is what we're hoping, is that these recommendations will be picked up by city leaders and, of course, hopefully also by state leaders, as we really seek to expand tenant protections, not just during the health emergency, but beyond and into the recovery period, into more permanent protections. When we look at who has been behind on rent, nationwide, we're seeing a lot of things that mirror what we're seeing here in Santa Fe and its data. Disproportionately, we see vulnerable communities being impacted by eviction, by COVID infection, by loss of income, by loss of job status. So we're seeing a lot of these intersections really come together. So when we're talking about an eviction moratorium or tenant protections, they are not separated from the public health crisis, nor are they separated from the context of what has come before. All of this is very much so related.
Madam Chair, can I interrupt real quick? So I'm trying to follow online or on Prime Gov, the presentation that was presented or that's loaded onto Prime Gov, and can't find it. So can you tell me what page you're on, Ms. Garcia?
I'm sorry, the question is which slide number am I on, or which
So we have a presentation loaded onto our presentation. I don't know what it's called. Prime Gov is what I call it, but it's typically, I think, what you're supposed to be presenting, and I'm just trying to follow along.
I'm not really sure what document you might have. I'm not sure if I could share this particular report. I'm not sure what might be the best way to do that.
Yeah, it looks like what we have may be something different than what you're sharing with us. So what we have is something dated August 2021, Beyond Recovery, policy recommendations to prevent evictions and promote housing security in Santa Fe.
Madam Chair, that's the actual report, their entire report, and I believe Ms. Garcia is doing slides based on that report. It's not, we don't have this particular PowerPoint uploaded to
our packets.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
awesome. Thank you. Yes, Councilwoman Villarreal, that is correct. And I think I understand a little bit better. Councilperson Rivera, yes, I believe what was shared was a copy of the report. And yes, I'm right now, I'm presenting a bit of a summary of that report, but I'd be happy to point to the certain pages of the report when I get to that slide, if that makes sense.
Oh, that's fine. I was just trying to look for the slide that you were talking about, and it just wasn't working out. So, but go ahead and continue. I'll just follow on the screen.
Tomas, your hand is up. Did you want to add to that?
Yes, thank you, Chair Meadoworth and councilors. Is it possible for us to share this maybe afterwards, or is there
sure.
a reason? Okay.
Yeah, if you send it to Jamie Ray, she can get it out to the committee. If that's something that you're able to do, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
Take it away, Kathy.
Thank you. So there is, of course, national context for what we're describing here. While we are, and our report focuses very specifically on Santa Fe, you know, this is about how all of these laws and all of these protections interact with each other. So we will also be talking a little bit here in this presentation and more in depth in the report about its intersection with state law in New Mexico around renters, and also, of course, what the federal government is doing. Of a really critical importance, you may have heard that very recently the Supreme Court has overturned the CDC eviction moratorium. The CDC eviction moratorium had been extended through October 3rd and would have gone until that time, but for the Supreme Court's most recent intervention. So now, states and cities that do not have their own moratorium in place are being served eviction notices right now. So we know that that will definitely have an impact on our own rental and housing market, which of course, as I'm sure many of you already know, has seen ballooning and skyrocketing prices all around. I believe that that will continue to be the case. since we are New Mexico residents continue to be protected from eviction moratoriums. But as states, they lose their protections, then we know that we're going to see a lot of internal migration within our own country. We know that the existence of the federal moratorium impacted the rate of eviction filings. This particular graph comes from our second report, which really kind of, like I mentioned, really detailed in data what was happening during the moratorium. And this was what we saw. Overall, evictions statewide were cut in half, just from regular averages. So that's fantastic news. Less evictions is good, right? In this moment, we're trying to keep people housed. The eviction moratoriums, by the way, were intended to keep people safe from COVID. This is about mitigating spread within the community. As the Delta variant returns and starts to be the reason why more infection is spreading, again, this is why the moratoriums were put in place. It was to help prevent the spread of this very deadly disease that we're all facing at the moment. These dips in eviction rates were because the various moratoriums at the federal level were having a chilling effect on how landlords in New Mexico were interpreting that. Suffice it to say like this: if folks heard on the news the federal government has done XYZ, they may not necessarily be aware that there is a local or a state protection. And so they just believe, great, I can start evicting again, or I'm not protected anymore. So that opens up the door for that type of vulnerability. And so that's what we see in these little dips that you see here on this chart. It was the chilling effect. But New Mexico has been and continues to be protected by a state moratorium, which was put in place by the state Supreme Court, as well as the city moratorium, which was put in place through mayoral emergency order at the beginning of the pandemic. Both of those continue to be in place. Despite the existence of the state and the city moratorium, we saw that evictions are continuing throughout the year 2020 and into the present in some of our most vulnerable neighborhoods who have already been historically rent burdened, which have seen the disproportionate impacts, have felt the disproportionate impacts of unemployment, of job loss, of loss in wages, not to mention COVID infection rates and rates of vaccination have also lagged in some of these key census tracts. If we look at our community, we can see that with evictions at the rates that are shown here on these graphs, we are still facing a housing crisis, and more so. If this is the rate that we're seeing during moratorium, I am terrified to think of what will happen once the state and the city moratoriums lift. You combine this with the rate of rental assistance that is being distributed state and nationwide, we're on the verge of a catastrophe, quite honestly. We need to get rental assistance into tenants' hands before the state moratorium lifts. Otherwise, there was no point in the moratorium and there was no point in trying to get that money distributed. These numbers are they speak for themselves. So after seeing and synthesizing and pulling all of that data together, working with our network partners, we came up with a list of solutions to these crises. These solutions, they need to begin now, whether they are short-term emergency protections or long-term protections. The groundwork for all of these policy solutions begins today. Again, part of why I'm grateful to be able to present this information to the Quality of Life Committee. With the lifting of the federal protections, I think it's even more urgent for city and state leaders everywhere to act. Yeah, let's talk about what some of those solutions might be and what they might look like here in Santa Fe. We know that in the immediate, we need to stop evictions during the pandemic. So we need to look at and examine the current city emergency order and how we can expand it under whatever we're allowed to do, and how do we make that even longer, and how do we codify them as long-term protections. Can we strengthen the moratorium, say by expanding it into certain zip codes and saying in these zip codes, the moratorium will last for even longer because they're even more vulnerable? Can we strengthen it by expanding who qualifies for the eviction moratorium and who is protected by it? Currently, because the eviction moratorium that was put in place by the city was done by mayoral order, to violate the mayoral order is it's a crime, and so it has to be reported through law enforcement, specifically Santa Fe Police Department. So if I am a tenant in Santa Fe who has been illegally served with an eviction notice, I have to make a police report to begin that process. As you can imagine, when we also talk about the intersection of vulnerable communities and police engagement, there are very few folks who are actually willing to use this mechanism in order to actually exercise their rights. When we're asking folks to call the cops for something like this, it also feels a little heavy-handed. It feels like we're escalating something when really what we're trying to do is negotiate and find a solution. So we would love to figure out how we can use different enforcement mechanisms. Again, not just for the emergency order, but for any time a tenant needs to report a problem with their living conditions, their contract, or anything like that. For that reason, we really believe that the city should be running and helping to support a tenant side hotline and be doing more outreach. There is a lot of information that is just not known to folks, even basic things like what should your contract look like and how does that impact your ability to make a complaint. Let's say if I do suspect that I have a building and code violation, how do I go about doing that? There's a lot of very basic questions that I think tenants need more info on. And then of course, we also want to see how the city of Santa Fe's cases are being recorded in state databases and how that intersects with the court system, and just how do we know what's happening. Data collection continues to be a very big challenge, just as far as knowing even basic things like how many units are being rented right now in Santa Fe, how many landlords are there, how many of them are large scale versus small scale landlords, how many of them are from New Mexico versus from out of state. These are the kinds of questions which really nobody in the state or in the city can answer because this data is not being collected. Again, all of this really relates to how we're deciding to make these policy decisions. As the moratoria start to lift, we also see that it's really urgent to forgive debt and get money into people's hands immediately. We need to do everything we can to forgive city water debt, since that is one of the utilities owned and managed by the city. We believe that there are mechanisms to use emergency funds, whether those are through the federal or through the city, or I'm sorry, through the federal or through the state, to find ways to make these things happen. The accumulation of back rent and fees, because the moratoria does not stop the debt, the debt continues to be owed back rent. We want to see the city repeat its model of direct cash assistance, which again, last November and December, the city of Santa Fe partnered with Chainbreaker and with Somos Un Pueblo Unido to distribute funds quickly to tenants and city residents who were at risk of eviction and who were at specific risk of losing their jobs. That particular model of cash distribution is something we would love to see the city repeat. and even for the state and the federal government to use as a model. We know that if the city can do it, has done it, we'd love to find ways to do it again. This is in concert with the fact that the Treasury Department has just issued, again, last week, new guidance on how states can spend that emergency rental assistance money. So we're all waiting with bated breath exactly what that interpretation will mean at the state level. But what we're hoping is that with a more streamlined application process and a, kind of more intentional process around this, that we could actually get this money into people's hands and prevent this flood of evictions. Related to that, we would also love to see more and improved mediation programs between tenants and landlords. There's been some progress made on this at the state level, but again, a lot of this is about outreach. Tenants may not know that such programs exist. Also, those state programs are only available if a court filing has already been initiated. We would love to find ways to develop mediation programs before legal filing has been needed, more as a intervention well before anyone ever has to go to court. In talking about the data gaps and our inability to answer a lot of these basic questions, we believe that a landlord registry or licensure program is a good way to start this. I analogize to the way that we are able to answer that question for short-term rentals in the city. There is someone I can call in the city to find out how many short-term rentals are registered, who the landlords are, and what the situation is. We are not able to do that with regular residential rentals. So I think using the Airbnb short-term rental model ordinances that we have and looking to expand that into residential rentals, I think would be a really great place to start. Related to that is also the expansion of legal counsel. One of the other things that we've seen is that organizations like New Mexico Legal Aid, because they receive federal funds, those funds are earmarked and restricted, and they are unable to work with undocumented communities. As a sanctuary city, this should concern us, because what this means is that our undocumented neighbors are unable to access that same legal protection which other residents in our city are. So that is of major concern. When we look at passing permanent tenant protections, we believe that there are things that the state can do to change landlord tenant law, but there are also things that the city can do while we wait for the legislature, to make some decisions on what that might look like. Certainly, we would look at how do we establish a community land trust on the Midtown property. Community land trusts, of course, are one of the tools that really protect against the fluctuations that we're seeing happen right now in Santa Fe. The reason that housing is unaffordable is because of the land value of that property. So if we can have some organization or entity or government entity actually maintain ownership of the land, and what we're doing is managing to stabilize that so that we can build affordable units, both rental and ownership on such a property, and really give families an opportunity to establish credit, stabilize their living situation, save up money to be able to, live that dream that we're all saying of a homeowner. But we also know that there's not enough homeowner supply. So that's going to be some time before that becomes a reality. We still have to house people in the meantime. So some of the other solutions could include being creative with the way that we establish overlay districts in the Midtown area. Again, we're looking at how do we protect these vulnerable zip codes that have already seen and historically been rent burdened and seen some of these COVID infections and COVID deaths. If you have any questions, if members of city residents are watching this presentation and they have questions about how all of these moratoria impact their rights as tenants and renters here in Santa Fe, we urge them to call the eviction protection hotline we have established. They can also find that information at our website, where we have also created an eviction protection frequently asked questions flyer for our city residents. And again, we urge you to give us a call if there are any questions. Certainly, we make that same availability open to City Council. That is all I have here. I am open for questions, and thank you so much.
Great, thank you. And if you would stop sharing your screen just so we can see everybody, that'd be terrific. Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Tomas and Kathy, for the information and the wealth of information in this latest report. I do have one quick question. On the slides, there was, I think, figure 7 and 8. It broke down the city into geographic areas, and it looked from the map like the Midtown campus area had the highest rates. And I guess my question is, what would call for that, given it's not necessarily a residential area? There's not, I mean, we do have our temporary homeless shelter set up there. So would that be what's driving up the rates? I'm just wondering why that rate is higher than the rest of the city.
I quite honestly do not have an answer for that, Councilor Garcia. Anything would be quite speculative. It's again, one of the things I want to just mention is this data on evictions was really only made available to organizations statewide last December. So we've really only had, I'll say, less than a year to really spend any time parsing this data and analyzing it. Anything I would say at this moment would be completely invented. I have no idea. What we do know, though, right, is that it's definitely those neighborhoods that are being impacted. Why or how exactly? Not sure, but the zip codes and the filing addresses on the court filings are telling us that that is absolutely the location. That's a hot spot.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. And I'm, again, I think it'd be incumbent of us to look deeper. And if it is folks using the address of the temporary shelter there, because it like I said, it looks like if it's the Midtown campus and the city and state complex, that particular area, and which is critical information to know.
If I may, I
sure
think
that we have the accurate
Councilor,
data.
yeah, Councilor Tomas has his hand raised. I don't know if he can add to your answer to your question.
I think I might, Councilor.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair Meadoworth. I might have interpreted your question just a little differently than Kathy did. So let me just offer what I have here. Is the report, I think the reasons why people are getting evicted is hard for us to understand in terms of the literal why are they getting evicted piece of it. But in terms of the geography, we have tried to break it down by census tract. And so those tracts include also the areas that are surrounding Midtown campus. So a report refers to Hopewell Man and the area surrounding Midtown campus. A lot of those evictions filings are coming from the apartments that are in the parks, the Coronado apartments, and in the surrounding areas, even some of the houses and some of the apartments, like well, a lot of the apartment complexes in the surrounding area are what we believe are driving that up. Probably not actually the campus itself, but it is possible, as you said, that people might be using addresses like that. But we think the large majority is coming from those apartment complexes.
Councilor Garcia, I would like to draw your attention to report number 2. And I'm seeing that I don't think I have a way of dropping a link in here. I'm not seeing a chat, but I'm happy to forward this with the information. In report number 2, we also break down on page 24 the census tracts and a few other social indicators of health and like just financial realities, economic realities of those particular census tracts. I'm just saying, like, all of that is kind of all related to that as well, right? These are areas that have also been historically rent burdened. So now the moment that those households met this crisis, the evictions just continued in the same way. Thank you.
Great. No, thank you for the follow-up. I really appreciate the clarification, Kathy and Tomas. No other questions, Madam Chair, but thank you for the presentation. Really appreciate the wealth of information and recommendations.
Great. And Kathy, just so you know, we don't use the chat function because of the Open Meetings Act and those kinds of requirements. So it's a little weird when I go into meetings and they use the chat and you got all this stuff going on. I don't know how to do it because we don't do it. So that's why. Councilwoman Villarreal, your hand is up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and just wanted to thank Chainbreaker Collective team and as well as the national nonprofit partners that were able to put this very detailed report together. I think there's a lot of great ideas. Some are low-hanging fruit, some take more work. I think the only thing that I'm trying to like grapple with is the infrastructure needed to do a lot of these things that we don't currently have, even to do some of the kind of basic code enforcement stuff that is challenging because of staff shortages. And so I'm always trying to think, how do we redesign or rethink how we do business so that there's like proactive ways to utilize our staff instead of like the theory about the stick versus the carrot. So I guess I don't have a solution yet, and I don't know if you all do, but I think I'm just consistently thinking about how to track things so that the data will tell us what we need to tell. The data will tell us what we need to know in terms of making policy decisions, but also doing things that are proactive, not reactionary. So that's what I'm interested in, the kind of proactive ways of dealing with supporting community before they actually get to the point where they are being evicted or they have situations where they're being, they have potential for being evicted. So that's kind of like where I'm like visualizing this report. And I don't have any specific questions. I think that there's some stuff I want to reread because it's very dense. And I just think it's great to have this kind of data to back up what we need, what's the local context, and how we can improve upon that. And the fact that you gave us policy recommendations, I think is very helpful instead of us trying to invent policy recommendations. I think as we move forward, we'll need support in some form to be able to have assistance in some way, whether it's our staff or contracted folks, to be able to help us do some of the research that's needed so that we could look at best practices. And it's great that you were able to connect some sections to actual municipalities that are already doing some of the policy recommendations. So thank you for that. I didn't get to go to all the links that were provided in the document. So just wanted to thank you all for your work. And I think it'll take a concerted effort by all sectors, not just government sector, but obviously the nonprofit sector and the private sector, to realize that we're all in this together to be able to support community members in order that everybody can thrive and that they are housing, they have a home and they're secure in their housing. So just thank you all.
Thank you, Councilwoman Villarreal. And again, I just repeat that if any of the councilors or any of the city staff do have questions or they want to talk with us in more detail about any of the things that we've brought up here, of course, we're always happy to, to have some time to chat.
Yeah, thank you. And also to just add to that is, I think how we tried to present the report, and hopefully how it's best read, is to look at the longer term solutions. So there's like the how do we get out of the pandemic, and the longer term ones we believe will help stabilize that scenario. So if and when something like this happens, we'll be much more able to be proactive in the future.
Thank you.
It.
All right, thank you both for being here tonight. Thank you for your work on these 3 reports. If you could get us your PowerPoint tonight when it's convenient, that'd be very helpful. Just get it to Jamie Ray. She can get it to the committee. And thank you. Thank you for your work. We're
Thanks for
gonna
having us.
move on. We have next one more presentation. And we have the director of our Arts and Culture Department here to talk about Culture Connects. And we have the assistant director here as well. So I don't know, I'll hand it over to you, Pauline, and you guys can take it away.
Great, let me just share my screen.
And Councilor Garcia, will you take your hand down just so I know whether we start again? That'd be great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Chair Romero-Worth and fellow councilors. It's my pleasure to be here with the Arts and Culture Department crew, or the ACDC team. That consists of Rod Lambert, our Assistant Director, and also Erminia Tapia, who is our Project Specialist. We are very pleased to give you an overview of what our department does. One of the main things that we're interested in and use as our value is Culture Connects, and the values and the tenets of that, which really focuses on IDEA, inclusion, diversity, equity, and access in all the programmatic things that we do. Erminia, I'm not sure if you're able to join us. Are you here?
I am here, but my connection's pretty spotty.
Okay, so Erminia, I'll go ahead and take over the slides then.
So much.
Okay. So Erminia's been managing our cultural investment funding program. And as you recall, back in last fiscal year, our budget was cut by 53%. So we went down from almost over 900,000 to 350. We went down from 6 grant categories to 2. We did a lot of listening to our grantees, our arts and culture partners. And again, it's lodgers tax funded. And so it's to promote arts marketing and promotion. Through listening to them for this fiscal year, we've created 3 categories: digital collaborative impact, which remains, and also the traditional marketing impact, which has a category A for those arts budgets over 500,000 and category B for those under 500,000. And that would help them be a little bit more competitive to each other. DCI really is about encouraging collaboration, and we've seen so much collaboration during this pandemic. Organizations helping each other out, partnerships building, someone saying, hey, I have an open space garden, another organization partnering with them to do that. And it's become very collegial versus fighting for scarce resources. We're really looking and seeing our partners leverage their resources together. That's how we're going to thrive and sustain ourselves and move forward during this recovery phase. We did have some celebrations this past year with the 29th Annual Mayor's Arts Awards. And that was done virtually, which was a new thing for us, as I'm sure a lot of virtual presentations have for everyone across the city. It was well attended with over 109, and we recognized artists in 5 categories: the arts innovator, Culture Connects, philanthropy, and the Melissa Engstrom Youth Artist Award. It was emceed by Carlos Medina and also Mayor Weber. And we're very pleased to say that with the summer concert series on the plaza, that 2 of our Mayor's Arts Awards were performing. That was Lightning Boy, and as well as the Youth Artist Awardee, which was, oh my gosh, Theo
Kutsko.
Thank you, Rod. And next year we will have our in spring of 2022 will be the 30th Annual Mayor's Arts Awards, and we'll be working with our arts commissioners to start planning that and really how to celebrate all the awardees over the past 30 years for that. In addition to what we do, we also support arts education. Through the CARES Act, we were able to support artwork through the Partners in Education with their professional development, especially around arts and trauma-informed instruction, which also included teaching artists to provide instruction over a virtual platform and how to do that, how the most effective way to do that. We also looked at supporting teacher training. The Georgia O'Keeffe Museum has something called Field Trip in a Box, which you could check out and have that experience virtually or at home. The Children's Museum did this wonderful thing with astronomy, and it was well attended, and those kids are so sharp. It was amazing to watch, and that's been recorded. The one thing that you'll notice when I say STEAM, I really like to put that capital A into science, technology, engineering, math, because I think it's really important. And we believe that arts is not just something beautiful to look at, but something that really helps with creativity, thinking, problem solving, and just part of that creative economy that is so dispersed throughout the place. And so there's also another listing of other things that we've supported. We also just recently announced the mayor's selections of the city historian, which is Valerie Rangel. This was a program that was established in 2017. She's our third city historian. She will serve for 2 years. And the goal of this is to conserve, promote, and document the Santa Fe's diverse cultural heritage and put into context. Our focus for this 2-year term is an emphasis on community-centered storytelling and definitely sharing the many histories. Valerie will be working in tandem with the CHART, the Culture, History, Art, Reconciliation, Truth consultant team, and I'll get to that more towards the end of the presentation. We were also very pleased that the mayor appointed Daryl Wellington as our city's poet laureate. This was a program established long ago in 2005, and Daryl will be doing not only just a series of readings, but also involving other poets and doing like a poetry contest / youth workshop. And so we're very excited to have him on board for that. Another thing that we're bringing, I don't want to say back to, we're reviving, that's the right word I want to use, is UNESCO's Creative City. We were the first city in the United States to have this designation for craft and folk art. And we've revamped the website, and we will start to look at and build in the next 3 to 5 years an artist in residency program where artists will come here and our artists will go into other creative cities nationally to begin with, and then globally. There is a potential virtual conference that we may or may not be able to do a pre-recorded session, again, to contribute and highlight the wonderful work that's happening here in Santa Fe, but also in northern New Mexico. So we're really looking at activating and promoting that as our cultural tourism. I'm going to hand it over now to our Assistant Director, Rod Lambert, to talk about the Community Gallery.
Good evening, Chair Romero-Worth and members of the committee. I'm Rod Lambert, and the Community Gallery was my baby. I was hired to be the Community Gallery Director in 2008, so all of the programming and operations and procedures for that program all kind of started with me at that time. So the Community Gallery was built with the intention of promoting, exhibiting, and selling the work of local artists. There was an economic development report previous to 2008 that indicated that I think up to like 80% of the art that was sold in Santa Fe was not made in Santa Fe. And so as a result of that, the council at the time, during the construction of the convention center building, carved out this space specifically intended to promote, exhibit, and sell the work of local artists. Our reach is the entire state of New Mexico. So we do artists throughout the state, depending upon who applies and gets into these shows. However, as a result of geographic proximity, I would say 80%, if not 90% of the artists that are in our shows are within Santa Fe County. We usually do 5 themed exhibits a year. There's 30 artists per show, 1 piece per artist. It's an open call. They go to a website and submit 5 images in response to a theme that has been designated by our staff. And then the committee selects the artist and votes based on the body of work. And then the top, usually it organically breaks at around 30 artists in every show. And each artist submits 1 piece of work. Our themes they often come internally, but we also offer the opportunity for organizations or private citizens to give us ideas for themed exhibits. And we have 5 criteria that we have for those. So if someone wants to propose a project, we want 3 of those criteria to be met. The most important one that's kind of a gimme for everyone is that it's an professional experience for local artists. Oftentimes, the artists who are participating in the gallery have never had a gallery show before. They may be a hobbyist working at their kitchen table. So that's one of the basic criteria, and pretty much any theme fits that. We like to have collaborative exhibits where maybe non-traditional partner with maybe say Chainbreakers partners with somebody else to do an exhibit that maybe an arts organization and a social conscious organization come together and propose a theme that serves to enhance both of their mailing lists and their connections and also bring a new crowd in. But we also like to have the exhibits coordinate with local historical cultural events. So there could be an opportunity to take advantage of like fiestas or some other local event that happens regularly, or an exhibit that references local history that serves as some kind of way to connect us to the continuum of history that exists in Santa Fe. And an educational opportunity for the public. So we like for 3 of those criteria to be met as a minimum. And then oftentimes our Art and Public Places Committee will, or our Arts Commission will vote on whether, that theme passes. Our exhibits are usually a full range of media, everything from painting and drawing to 3D to video to fiber arts. We've had everything in there and we welcome it. It makes it a more rich textural experience for the public. And I think it really makes all of the artwork look better. And a lot of the artists, there could be artists who are represented by a local gallery in there, as well as absolute beginners, like I said earlier, who may be working at their kitchen table. So it ends up making the people who may be beginners, they know that they may be in there with another recognized or nationally known Santa Fe artist, and the quality of work for each piece goes up. All of our exhibits offer programming opportunities that are free to the public. We've had basket weaving workshops, we've had tin work, straw applique, we've had panel discussions, we've even had a play performed in there. So we kind of do a variety of public engagement workshops to enhance the exhibit theme beyond just this like siloed experience of walking through a gallery. We want the community to come in and learn something and see the show and put 2 points together. We also have one youth arts exhibit every year that's usually dedicated to an arts nonprofit that represents children. We've partnered with Partners in Education before, the New Mexico School for the Arts. So we like to bring in and have a youth opportunity for the youth to come in and have a formal gallery experience and make them realize that like art is a career option. So next slide, please. Our next program after the gallery is our Art and Public Places program. This has been since 1985, and its intention is to beautify the Santa Fe community through our portfolio of art. There's 3 ways that we acquire work. One is through purchase, through capital improvement projects. For example, the Southside Teen Center, as a function of that CIP bond, 2% of that money goes into a bond for us to be able to use public art to enhance that building. So we're currently working on that contract as well. Oh, if you can go back, Pauline, sorry. Oh, and then there's donations. So if there's an artist or someone who wants to donate a piece of artwork to the city portfolio, the white lattice work piece that's in front of the downtown library was one of those pieces. It was on loan for the longest time. And then the artist eventually was like, it's perfect there. Y'all just take it. So we had to work on a contract to take the donation. And we're so happy for that kind of opportunity. It obviously has to be approved through the proper cycles, but we like to have the Arts Commission and then all the way up through to approve that kind of program. And then we do art on loan. So there's probably at least 9 pieces of art in the city portfolio currently. Those 2 pieces by Bob Houses across from the Solano Center. You may not know that, but they're on loan and have been pretty much indefinitely. And then also the bull that's right behind City Hall, that's also a piece of art that's on loan. And that's an opportunity for local galleries and local artists to have their artwork on display and promote their artists, but also beautify on public property. And we usually do, currently we're doing a 4-year contract with these artists or galleries to have that program be activated. Okay, thank you. Next slide. Yeah, so again, 2% of capital improvement projects, and the GRT bond from 2018 had a balance of like $400,000 that we're using for a number of projects, including putting art at the convention center. There's a mural going on at the Salvador Perez Pool, the Genevieve Chavez Community Center. There is in the skate bowl there. We're working on a project with Alas de Agua and YouthWorks to engage the users of that space to decorate that skate bowl and the municipal recreation sports complex. And we're doing some sculptures out there. So here's a listing of the MRC groups that we're doing. Some of these artists. That's going to be the Community Convention Center. And then we're going to do Hernan at the Southside Library, working on that project now. There's going to be a series. The ones on the right here are all going to be at the MRC. And then the two at the bottom were purchases through the state. So again, sometimes those CIP bonds go through the state and we have to follow their procedure, but they walk us through it. And we essentially bring a shopping list to the team of people at the airport, for example, and say, here you go, here's a selection, here's how much money you have. And they go shopping and we pick these two pieces represented in the bottom there. Next slide. Oh, that's you, Pauline.
So we also, with our art in public places, our public art portfolio, that there's conservation and routine maintenance. So we work with the client department, and client department is defined as who property or purview the artwork stands on. So right now, and as you know, with the rains, we had another of the archangels come down. That's Raphael. Our artist, Jose Lucero, is still working on Sachiel and will be starting on Raphael. This was done through a public-private partnership fundraising effort called the Angel Fund, and we will relaunch that again in order to cover costs for Raphael. And the artist is actually doing this for, pennies on the amount of work that he's hand carving, doing hand-painted traditional tints is really quite amazing, and he was featured in several news articles. Another one is El Diferente, and that's at the park, Tom Macioni Park. The stone flat work there is damaged. And so we've submitted estimates to Public Works, who will put that in a bond that's coming up for consideration. So we hope to find funding and to work with parks on that. El Torreon del Torreon, that was with artist Pedro Romero. There was some cleanup that had to do, including the relocation of a porta potty, which we worked with parks, and that was removed. And we're also looking at relocation of some of the park accessories because they somewhat block the art installation on that. So we'll continue to work with parks on as a partner. The latest one we have is a New Mexico quilt. If you've ever been to Lafarge Library, it's right when you walk in. It's a beautiful, beautiful tile, hand-painted tile mural, and it has many different stories. So we're getting estimates to conserve that, repair that. But there's a lot of flaking, but otherwise it's in really good condition. But we hope to have that conserved back to its glory. And when the library opens again, to either have a scavenger hunt and create different programming with the library in conjunction to keep good stewardship and to keep the artworks alive, especially for the youth that go there. One thing that we're really excited about, as you may recall, is the fitness court. And it's a signature series Keith Haring court that we were awarded as a city. And that will be going in shortly. We have to work around the rain and some other issues, but we hope by October will be a great time to have a launch and be able to do something for our health and wellness as we go. And concerned about COVID safe practices, but this is a really great outdoor court. It's separated enough that you can still use it, and we will be letting you know for you to come out and give it a try with us. So tie up those gym socks and shoes. We also know that from the pandemic, how important arts and culture has on the city and its impact on GRT. And so to further promote cultural tourism, we are starting a campaign that will launch shortly called Famous. And those are those Santa famous people, the local people who are really the heart and soul of what makes this place special. And our first three famous spokesperson, if you will, include Brian Hardgroove, formerly a Public Enemy, who's a music producer and lives now here in Santa Fe. Lucy Tapahanzo, who was the first Navajo Poet Laureate, an amazing poet and artist in her own right. And also, we have the Grand Dame of Spanish Market, and she's just amazing, Monica Sasaya Helfin, and their stories and what they have to share is just really amazing. And we hope to continue this campaign to highlight the locals here that make this place so wonderful and why people come to visit and why our neighbors love being here and seeing people. So we're very pleased to have that. So please stay tuned for that. Roy, did you want to do the next one on CARES?
Yeah, as a function of our CARES Act money that we received, we wanted to do as much as we could to kind of get that money into the community, but at the same time kind of help prepare the community for like the new future, like it's never going to go back again. So a big part of that was digital literacy and making sure that people were prepared for this new economy, and they need for everyone to be literate, but also competent and confident in their abilities to be able to do that. So we hired 3 instructors who were, they had specialties in these fields. So digital marketing was a series of a workshop that we gave out. They were all free to the public. We just ended up, paying the people to do it, and they kept track. And it was somewhere 3 or 4 weeks, somewhere even, I think, longer than that. But the digital marketing was all about how to manage yourself online, no matter what your business is, but it was specifically focused for creatives. Also, there's a visual recording workshop that we did. Visual recording is kind of an up and coming skill set that people have. It's almost like recording a meeting, but instead of doing it in written minutes, this is a way to do it visually. So if you see in that top image, this trains people in the skill set to be able to do illustrated, topical, and of the minute notes that people respond to who may be visual thinkers as opposed to readers. And it serves as a summary for the meeting, and it helps give people a better overview who don't necessarily want to slog through the minutes. So we trained a bunch of people to work on that project. We did 2 phases of it. And so we have a group of people now that are currently like trained to do it, and they were attending public meetings, and they had deliverables where they had to actually record these meetings and then turn them into the teacher. So we're training a kind of a creative class of people who have the skill set already, but giving them the way to teach information, communication, as opposed to just creating an image. And then digital literacy. And then we've also we're developing a photo lab in the back of the gallery in our old storage closet. The biggest hurdle for artists when they enter the market is that they either cannot afford a photographer to photograph their work, or they don't have the skills or the materials to be able to photograph it well themselves. So what we've done is we have built a photography lab in the back of the gallery, and we're going to offer an opportunity for artists, once everything opens up again, to be able to be trained on the equipment and be certified through a video training workshop, and then have them be able to come in and, designate a space on the schedule and come in and be able to bring their work and photograph their work and walk away with a jump drive that has an entire kind of portfolio of their work that then they can use for their websites, for their social media, for any printed media. They'll just have those images available, and that will give them access to a market that they currently can't access. The other Culture Connects, we did we did Living La Vida COVID, which was all with Carlos Medina, doing kind of, and Mountain Mover Media. They did kind of this comedy series of wearing your masks and all the COVID safe practices. And then we did Las Mascarenas, which was again another version of that, same group that we did. And then we did mini grants of hope to artists and gave them all of the COVID safe practices, and they came up with individual projects in which they would communicate, like as you see on that wall, there were a series of, posters and images that were put up to kind of promote COVID safe practices to members of the community and to underserved community and those who had the higher rates at the time. Next slide.
Great. And so all this brings us to what's happening as part of the recovery. So on a national scale, we are getting the city's $15 million for the American Rescue Plan. As I understand, the first tranche has already been allocated definitely for that housing affordability and sustainability issue that Chainbreaker was still talking about. And I know that the city is very interested in supporting and uplifting our community members and our neighbors. But we hope Arts and Culture hopes to put in our request for the second tranche, which is a new word that I've adopted now, to again further enhance the efforts that we're doing for workforce development within our creative and our culture bearers. The other super exciting thing is the HR Bill 5019 that was introduced by Representative Leger Fernandez. That is about a new version of the WPA, and that is working its way through legislation, but that would be about $300 million to invest in jobs for artists. And there's stats on my left of the screen that talk about the importance and the impact. And again, during the pandemic, we saw the impact that the creative economy and our arts and culture places, not just museums, but artists, individual musicians, performers, really have on bringing life and creativity and dollars into the city. And so we hope to further look at this, and we'll be following Sarah very closely. The final thing that we are involved with is CHART and the consultant team of Artful Life. They have just begun, and if you might know, today was a deadline for community project facilitators. They had over 112 applications, and that was as of last night. So I'm sure, as most artists and other folks, we wait till last minute to submit things. So we'll get final numbers later, and they will start to train those folks and begin the community convenings, which we hope will be in October. We will all, of course, be watching the Delta variant and COVID-19 as we go forward. And just like the rest of the city, we will follow the city's mandate as well as the CDC's mandate and the governor's, and we will do as much as we can to reach the widest spread community as possible and get community-centered engagement. So that's our presentation. That's kind of what we do in a nutshell, and we are happy to talk about more. We would love to spend more time, and we're just so grateful to have this opportunity to give you a quick bird's eye view of the things that we've been doing. So thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. We'll go to questions from the committee. Councilwoman Villarreal.
I always feel good when you all present to us. Makes me happy, makes me feel like there's just excitement and energy despite our current circumstances with the pandemic. So I just appreciate that fully, and I just wanted to share that because it's hard, some of the stuff we talk about in quality of life is heavy, heavy, difficult, hard, as we just presented the first presentation. So I just wanted to let you know that. And I also want to say that the term culture connects, a lot of people use it, but really that came about because of the work that maybe some of you don't know about because it was before your time on the council. And having Esteban Rael Galvez really lead that effort in the last administration to really talk to people in the community about what they want to see as it relates to culture and art and how it can connect to the community. So I appreciate you're still using that term, and a lot of probably the values and ideals and ideas that came out of that presentation and that project. So that's great to see. The one thing I was excited to hear about also is the UNESCO Creative Cities, that there's actually like a partnership that is being created, and instead of us just having a title and having people go on trips to different parts of the world. I think this makes more sense to have artists in residency, artists come here. Our local artists go elsewhere. It just really makes sense to me. And I'm happy to hear that that's developing. I'm just curious, is there a connection to that, to Sister Cities program? And are you all still having to facilitate and run or lead that? And where is that housed now?
Sister Cities is no longer under us. I believe that's under tourism. And again, because I don't think they've convened just during the pandemic, the emergency proclamation.
Right. Okay, just curious about that because it used to be under your department and I never really understood that connection. So I think that makes sense. All right. And then co-director Lambert, you were talking about the community gallery. I so miss those art shows and exhibits, especially the youth art show and how excited they were to show their art and talk about it. So I'm excited for the day that we get to do that again. And I'm curious, would you be having some kind of, depending obviously on the pandemic, but are you planning to have in-person gallery shows at some point?
Councilor Villarreal, members of the committee, yes, we actually installed a show that was supposed to open last year in March. So literally Director Kamiyama and I were the only two that saw that exhibit. The artist had to pick everything up in August. So what I've done is I've pushed the whole calendar back. And so the next show that you're going to be seeing is called Neon and Chrome. And it's a kind of a visual vocabulary of Route 66. So it's all about like how Route 66 served as a tourism route and brought people into New Mexico and was an economic development driver, and this a modern version of kind of, Fred Harvey and all of the Harvey hotels. So we did a Fred Harvey show years ago. This is a modern version of that focused on tourism. So that will be, hopefully we had planned to open, end of September. So maybe we might not have a formal opening, but we're hoping to have the gallery open for limited hours and then have 2 staff members there to reinforce the mask kind of mandate and safety for all. And we're going to have signage where there's one entrance and one exit. So we're trying to figure out how to control all of that. But yes, it's coming, and there's 3 exhibits planned after that. And I'll probably put the other exhibit that recently was missed by everyone. I'll put it on the other end of the schedule so it'll pop up again. All those artists were disappointed. So I hope to reward them for their patience.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Also just excited for the Culture Connects, the famous campaign, and maybe you can share, I don't know if we have time, but if there's a way to let us know how you make the criteria for selection, because I think that will be hard because there's a lot of folks that could fall into that category as famous. So I'm just curious, do you all have a criteria, or how are folks selected for that?
That's a really great question. So for this first round, we as staff bounced ideas around. And as we continue going on, we'll turn to our arts commissioners and city councilors for nominations. But we do see this as an ongoing campaign for us. And not just a campaign, but really highlighting and celebrating our local celebrities. They are the heartbeat. They're the pulse.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great to hear. And I will flag him when we get to that point with the American Rescue Plan to make sure that we're looking at those relief funds for folks that work in the arts and culture. They've been left behind in many instances because they didn't qualify for certain resources. So I think that we just have to flag that as we start talking about that and planning ahead. And also maybe there's a way, we talked about this in finance, about ways to get more information from the community about what they see is important to fund through the ARPA funds. So maybe there's some way to connect with you all and your partnerships with the community organizations and artists in the community. And then last, well, there's a lot of great things. I'm excited to hear about that visual recording because we do that in my other organization. And I heard a lot of people tell me that that was very helpful, successful training, that they really enjoyed that. So thank you. And then just last, I just went, wow, 112 people that applied for the facilitation, right? Community facilitators. So that's pretty remarkable. Very happy to hear that. And I think it'll be hard to sift through that, but good luck with the team to do that. And that's all I have. Thank you both for your presentation and your work. And also Arminia over there that I can't see. Oh, there she is. Not really there, but thank you, Arminia, as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Other questions from the committee? I have a couple. On the community gallery, are artists able to sell works from that exhibit? Or do they, or is it one of those things where you just have to contact the artist and then they?
As a function of the gallery that promote, exhibit, and sell. So when I first started, we had to work out a system with legal in which we could do a kind of a commissioned artwork situation or where they were on consignment. And then the artist, I worked with a local gallery actually, because I knew I was going to be receiving artists from private galleries as well that were local. And so I wanted to make sure that the galleries would be getting credit for their work also in helping local artists. So I worked out a situation where we have a 70-30 split if it's a private gallery and we're using the artist that they represent. And then I have a contract with the gallery and all of the work goes through there. And then they have to leg wrestle about who gets what on their end. But then for artists, we wanted to do a better split than a private gallery. Often private galleries are 50-50 or 60-40 in the other way. So we do a 60-40 split currently where the artist gets 60, we get 40.
Great. And do you do that with youth as well?
The youth artwork, unfortunately, it's difficult to enter a contract if they're under 18. So it's more of an exhibit situation where they just get an opportunity to present.
Okay. Okay. Great. I think that's pretty important that this parlays into an economic benefit as well as, raising the profile of some of these artists so that we can watch their careers and watch their skills develop. So that's great. The rock, paper, this is kind of an odd question. The rock, paper, scissors sculpture that you had pictured, there's another one of those at Martin Luther King. Is it the same one? And why are there two and at the park?
I think that image that was there was from the original packet of when we were working on the actual purchase of that piece, but the placement of that piece was somewhere else. So sorry for the confusion.
Yeah, no, yeah, but are there two?
There's just one and it's located on, is it Rodeo or?
Yeah, it's in Martin Luther King Park.
It's a little vest pocket park there, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I don't remember it having so much color as your slide shows, but now I'll have to go back and look. So
there may be several versions, and maybe I know there was one at his gallery, and then we purchased another one through the purchase program.
Okay, so anyway.
So there could be variations on the theme, you're correct. And we'd also like to work on landscaping around that piece, as well as the hummingbird on the south side, because both of those sites feel like a plop in, and we'd like to make it a more engaging environment as well.
Well, we do have a Girl Scout who is working to bring some trees and pollinator plants to that park. So it is going to get a facelift. I'm not sure whether she's what her plans are close to the sculpture, but certainly that park itself is going to get some attention, and she's currently doing an incredible job there. So that's another story. But anyway, thank you all for being here. I too want to say I'm really glad that we got this presentation in. I feel like so many times you guys are out there doing stuff and we may not necessarily know about it. So it's kind of nice to get this broad brush overview of things. And certainly as your work progresses and hopefully as we open up more, please be in touch, because I think it's really important that we highlight and bring to the surface the work that's going on in this department, very critical to our economy here in Santa Fe. And I certainly would like to help you. So please let me know of things that might be appropriate for the committee to be hearing about.
Wonderful, Chair. Really appreciate that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for being here tonight. All right, we are going back to our consent agenda. We approved it earlier. Councilwoman Villarreal pulled, let me just pull up PrimeGov. Item 7C, a request for approval of an agreement between the City of Santa Fe and Axon Enterprise, Inc. in the total amount of $5,481,937.15 for 5 years for providing body-worn cameras, in-car cameras, interview room cameras, less lethal taser devices, empathy training devices, and all associated equipment and software to manage the provided devices. And I believe we have staff here to answer questions. Yeah, we have Deputy Chief Valdez. Thank you for being here tonight. Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to follow up, the question I had in finance was trying to understand what was approved in the budget and PD's budget. And then if there were line items that actually covered these requests. And I did hear back from finance department and they said they were not. And I just wanted to confirm with you all. I thought there were some line items that did cover body cameras.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, the money that was allocated in the budget for body cams was to maintain our current legacy system. So if it was a small equipment purchase, like a battery that needs to be replaced, or if the camera head needed to be replaced, or in the rare event that the entire system would need to be replaced for the actual device, it was just for maintenance of the current system. It was not to complete this larger project that was not included in the authorized budget.
Okay, thanks. And Deputy Chief Valdez, was this request and the need for this upgrade a result from state legislation?
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, it's twofold. Once we had our independent audit conducted in 2019, we were in search of a new system. COVID hit, so everyone kind of had to tighten their belts financially to see how things are going to fare from there. But House or Senate Bill 8 certainly increased the urgency on this. The department's always been proactive with obtaining body-worn cameras. We had them before it was required by the state law. But again, that did put the urgency on needing to upgrade our cameras, which were already in need of replacement. And based on the recommendation provided in that independent audit, we looked at this vendor, and that's how we're coming forward today to request your review and approval of it.
Okay, thank you. So it's twofold. It's like you said, the 2019 audit recommendations, and then the Senate bill that required body cams. So, okay, and then let's see. In the document, I just wanted to understand if you could tell us more about what the virtual reality empathy training entails.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, the empathy training, it's virtual reality training, much like a simulator. And what Axon did was they partnered with mental health professionals, and they really try to get the perspective of those that are in crisis, depending on what is going on. With that, it allows our officers to be able to put on the equipment, be put in scenarios where they can hone their crisis intervention skills, which we send them to training for, but to help manage those situations. Through training, that's a good way for us to create a resource where our staff can go back to. So if they do have to have an encounter with someone that is in crisis, they're allowed to have better outcomes. That's what we're all trying to do. Axon, this is a new product for them that they're putting out there. We see a lot of value in it. And we're hoping that it will build upon the skills that we have right now and also improve those with our staff so we can have better outcomes when we're dealing with those types of challenging situations.
And does Axon create that virtual reality video or whatever do they actually create that within their own company?
Yes, Councilor. And they do it through partnerships that they have. They're a pretty amazing company based on what they do and also the people they surround themselves with. And again, they're looking at people that are in that area of expertise. So they're working with them to develop these types of things. What's really helpful is that it gets updated as well as part of this. So we're always getting that latest information and the latest trends to be able to utilize for training for our staff.
Thank you. Is there a way that, I'm just curious what it looks like, if there's a way to actually get to see it eventually, like counselors, even though we're not going through that particular training, but I'd love to see what the actual virtual reality characters and yeah, I'm just curious about it. Is there a way that we could do that? You're muted, I believe.
My apologies. Absolutely, Counselor. Something we're trying to do, again, we're being proactive with this. We're trying to get this approved, but we're also wanting to share with the community what this technology does. And the empathy training is an important part of that. So we have requested Axon to bring that equipment out here. We're working with a venue we're hoping across the street at the Santa Fe Place Mall. They have like a mobile video trailer that has all this equipment there. And we want to invite the community out for that. We want our city leadership to come out. And if we get leadership from the state to come out to look at what's available and hope that we can utilize some of these tools to assist us with the challenges that we face. The only way you really kind of get this type of training is if you have people that are actors or role players. That is a great way to do it. But again, the logistics with it is very challenging. But this is a good alternative to that. It's the use of simulators, which will help us out with that. But I'd be happy to invite everyone to come take a look at that and also invite our community to come take a look at the equipment so they can see what we're doing, how we're trying to be proactive, and how we're trying to, work towards better outcomes. That's ultimately what we're looking for.
Counselor, Chief Padilla has his hand up, but if he wanted to add.
Yes, thank you, Chair and Councilors. Good evening. Councilor Villarreal, you mentioned the funding. The funding that you may have seen was under the Edward Byrne grant, so it wasn't necessarily directly in our budget or when we presented budget earlier. So it's in the Edward Byrne grant. That's probably where it's chiming your memory, where it ranges from $20,000 to $25,000. That Edward Byrne grant, where we use to do replacement camera heads, batteries, and small devices. So that's the information that's probably in your head. So that's where that is at, and it was just to support the program. And just to continue on what Deputy Chief Valdez is mentioning, we do have representatives from Axon here with us tonight, Mr. Kyle Peck and Mr. Ellen Sliper, who's in the attendee room. If you guys have direct questions regarding that empathy training or how the virtual reality simulator works, they're here for us tonight to ask the experts, and that's all I have.
Thank you, Chief. Actually, if there's somebody that would want to speak a little bit more about the virtual reality platform they use and how do they decide what characters to put in. I'm just curious about that, mostly because, I don't know if there's like a local context to it or if they just kind of generally use characters that they use throughout the country.
Do we have is the person in the attendee room necessary? Do we need to promote that person?
Yes, Madam Chair, if possible. And Mr. Kyle Peck can speak to the empathy training and VR training.
Okay, and it's Alan that we need to promote?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, and John, I don't know if you're still here. I'm not seeing you. And
I just got Alan promoted.
Oh, thank you, Jamie Ray.
You're welcome.
Fabulous. All right, take it away.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to the VR training piece of this. Thanks for having us on. We are really excited about the VR content that we're bringing to the communities and to our customers and law enforcement. We've partnered with health clinicians and experts to release modules. We release a new module each month, and it's really to help our partners in law enforcement be better prepared to work with members of the community that might be experiencing challenges with, a few of the modules that we have built out so far are members of the community that might be experiencing schizophrenia, suicidal ideation, peer-to-peer intervention, officer to officer. And so what the training does is it puts the officers in the shoes of somebody experiencing that mental challenge, and then they re-enter the scene as the officer, where they can respond. And basically, it's kind of like a choose your own adventure where they're given choices of, do we want to handle it this way or that way? And so that way, from a training perspective, they can work with each of their officers on, hey, this person was experiencing this. This is how it feels to be a member of the community and have a squad car roll up on you with a flashlight on and maybe a weapon drawn or the lights on the car. And so it's really designed to help officers better empathize with members of the community that are experiencing these challenges.
Thank you, Mr. Peck, for that information. I don't know if Mr. Sliper, is that how you say your last name? If you want to add, and I also wanted to see, did I get that right?
It's Slipper, but go.
Slipper, I'm sorry, Slipper. If there was a way you could explain if it's a general, like the characters you use in these scenarios, if they're just like, how do you, are they the same folks that you use across the country for each training module for each municipality? How does that work?
It's probably best so I handle everything software and camera related. The virtual reality and CEW, which is a taser weapon, is more Kyle's purview. So I'll let him answer.
Yeah, it is standardized professional actors that we use to shoot this. So to answer your question specifically, it is not like regionality based. It's actors that we're using, and we're rolling out that content to law enforcement across the country.
Thank you. I am interested to actually see it. Part of me doesn't want it to be stereotypes. So that's why I'm interested to actually view it, because, everybody in some form or another can experience mental crisis, and it depends on what that looks like and where, what the person is experiencing. So I guess that's where I'm going with this, and that's what I care about. So I would like to see it when staff is able to launch it at that point, when we actually get to be hands-on with it. So thank you.
Yeah, quickly on that, sure. We can absolutely get a headset out there and take you guys through some of these modules so that you can experience them firsthand. We'd be happy to do so.
Great, thank you. Let's see. So I had questions in the contract having to do with, I think it's on page 8 of 23. It has to do with the Wi-Fi positioning. And there's a company called Skyhook Holdings Incorporated that was added in there. As I don't know if that's another partner, but my question was to staff, is that another contract that we'd have to pursue with Skyhook for Wi-Fi positioning functionality, or is that included in the overall package?
Thank you, Counselor. That's actually a partner that we have that we use to obtain that Wi-Fi positioning and location. But no, this is all, we provide everything in this bundle, and there's no other partner for you to engage. For instance, our cameras have the ability to live stream. We include that LTE card and program with the camera so that you guys don't have to manage a separate LTE carrier to do that. So we do have partners. We integrate everything so that we deliver it to you straight from Axon.
That's good to know. Thank you. And then simultaneously, there's also this cartridge replenishment plan. And it talks about the agency must purchase the plan for each CEW user. And is that also included in the contract requirements?
Thank you, Counselor, for the question. Yes, it is. Essentially, we, as part of this, include cartridges for training each year so that all of the officers can go through and practice proficiency with the devices, as well as replenishment cartridges for any that are deployed out on duty.
All right. I think that was, let's see. I'm just going through the document. We don't have a very user-friendly document to see all the pages, so I have to just go through each one. So I think that's it for those are more financial, and I'll ask this again because I asked this in finance about what this package includes, and I would just want to make sure again, is facial recognition technology included in this package?
So Axon has a very public stance on how we view facial recognition technology. We've made investments into artificial intelligence, but not for the purposes of facial recognition. DC Valdez mentioned it the other day, but it's an important distinction between facial detection versus facial recognition. Difference being facial detection is that is a face, and facial recognition is that's John Smith's face who lives at X address. So we're not interested in commercializing it at this point because we just feel with the inherent biases in facial recognition technology currently, it's just not something that is ready to deploy. So we use it for the purposes of, like DC Valdez talked about, being able to redact videos much more quickly when the system knows that it's seeing a face, but not whose face, not what type of face, just a face.
Okay. Good answer. Thank you. I think that would have helped to have that finance, but thank you again. And then the other piece was the license plate recognition technology. Is that part of it? This package?
We have it available, but they will not be turning it on. I know I was there for the finance meeting. I know the concerns surrounding that.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's it. I mean, this is a hefty project. It seems like our IT staff is going to be very intimately involved in this, I'm assuming. And so did we, I guess from PD or from your staff, who's going to be kind of leading this through the IT department? Because to me, it's all going to be connected to your technology, this technology, along with our department. So what does that look like? Did you kind of map that out? And time-wise, how much IT staff time are we going to be utilizing for this project?
Madam Chair, Councilor Vidya, we went through the IT governance board with this. We're very fortunate working with Axon during the testing evaluation to see what capacity is going to be utilized from our staff. The first part is just going to be the initial setup. So when we set up the whole program, that's where the most involvement is going to be. Our IT staff is prepared for that. They already have been deploying the 4 test and evaluation cameras that we had in the field. And then it'll just be, maintenance that goes out as things are being pushed out, setting up the docking stations. But the vast majority of the service and the updates to the program is going to be done by Axon. And I'll let Alan add any additional information from their end to let you know the capacity that may be needed from our IT staff.
Yeah, there's been a trend. I've been in public sector software for about 15 years, and there's been a trend from handling things yourselves on premise to doing things in the cloud that we all hear about every day. But there's true benefits to be had there in the sense that we are handling all the management of the servers and the data. And should things go south or malfunction, your staff not scrambling to figure out how to move the data from one server to another. We're handling all that ourselves. So it really does take a lot of the lift off of a city IT department. And that's one of the reasons we work with as many as we do. I think worldwide, we're with about 17,000 law enforcement agencies. And that's a big reason as we make this transition from managing things yourself to letting the experts handle it essentially.
And to follow up with that, part of our issues, I think, with some of the contracts we have is that we become too dependent on the contractor. And so they just have this contract that goes on into infinity. And so I don't really want to see that. I want us to be able to be technically savvy, our staff, IT, as well as obviously having you all to fall back on if there were any problems. So what is I mean, I guess I just want to understand how you all set that up so that we are self-sufficient, but you're there for backup in case something happens.
I mean, it all comes down to training. All of our training implementation specialists are former law enforcement. So they really understand day-to-day workflows of a police department. And then we also have obviously technical staff that can help train up your technical staff so they can be self-sufficient. Because you're right, you want them to be able to address their own issues and get into the system when they need to. But at the same time, have somebody like us to fall back on should things not go smoothly or should more research or information be necessary.
Okay, and so this contract's 5 years. Is that a typical time frame that you all have with municipalities?
Yep, that is our standard term. We work with, if you think of a major city police agency, it's very likely we work with them. And 5 years is our standard contract. Some even do longer terms because they want to lock in more predictability over a longer period. But 5 years is our standard term.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think we have some high hopes for this. I mean, so that our officers have the tools they need, and also, making sure that we're trained so that we don't have to use a less lethal taser device, or even that the empathy training devices are, the empathy training is helpful so that we can figure out in crisis situations, but also high emotion situations, and
right.
That our officers are able to respond with empathy. So I think there's just a lot. This is 5 years of a lot of investment. So I'll be, paying attention to how this rolls out. And there was one other question I had. What was it? If it comes back to me, I'll ask it, but I just think this is important, and also to make sure that we have the tools we need, as well as resources from people that work with mental health to be able to partner with that, and versus just using technology. So I'll just stop there. Thank you. If I can think of my other question, I'll come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Rivera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is for the contractor as well. And I wasn't clear that, does the training involve people of color or people that are within the area? Specifically, I guess Hispanics and whites that are predominantly in the area? And does it include other races as well?
Yeah, when it came to selecting the actors and actresses that are a part of these community engagement modules, as I mentioned, we're releasing a new module each month. And so there's a wide variety of different people that play a part in all of these modules. And we try to get a very diverse selection. And I thought Counselor made a good comment about just making sure that there's not biases there. And that's something that we've definitely been very cognizant in all of our material that we are building out for this. We work with mental health clinicians and doctors, former law enforcement, that are really helping us and giving us input in terms of how we're shaping this curriculum. So there is a diverse set of actors and actresses playing in each of the modules.
All right, and with that, I assume from what I heard you say is different behaviors as well, mental health patients versus just, I guess, people that would act in a normal manner, I guess, whatever somebody might term as normal.
Yeah, so a few of the modules that I mentioned, suicidal ideation, schizophrenia, Alzheimer's, veteran PTSD, peer-to-peer intervention. There's a whole host of different modules that we're releasing content around. And the idea is, if you can get an officer, if you think about like a new officer coming out of the academy, and you can put them through these modules in the headset that lasts 5 to 10 minutes and coach them on the policy and the best way to work with members of the community like that, they can build up years and years of experience, right there in the matter of a few hours on a headset. And the emotion that it creates, I don't know if any of you guys have maybe kids that have a virtual reality headset, but your palms are getting sweaty. You really feel immersed into this scenario that you're living through. And so the reason why we're leveraging virtual reality is similar to, why surgeons and pilots are using it, and that is it creates real life experiences, and the memory tension is much stronger in a virtual reality setting. And so there's a whole host of different types of scenarios and different actors and actresses that are playing in those.
Thank you for that. Have you ever had situations where maybe an officer didn't react appropriately to a certain situation, maybe on multiple occasions, and how was that handled?
I don't know that I have a specific answer to that. I would say that, part of it is a choose your own adventure where it gives you different choices as the officer of what do we want to do here. And I think a certain part of learning can come with maybe intentionally choosing the wrong thing. What would happen if I went this road instead of this road? And so I think part of the different options and part of the training is to, help these officers understand the best way to navigate these types of situations. In terms of, have we had people choose the wrong thing over and over again? That's something that if you're interested in us following up with you, Counselor, I'd be happy to get you some additional information on that. Can I ask what the question, a little bit more detail around why you're asking the question?
So I think you said that you let officers choose the training session they want. So what's to prevent an officer from choosing the same one over and over in order to be successful?
Gotcha. Okay. So essentially when you put on the headset, you're dropped into this library, and so the training department can say, all right, this week everybody's going to go through this setting. And so the first, 5 minutes of that training will be you experiencing that scenario from the perspective of the community member. And then the scenario switches to where now you're the officer responding to a call for service with that member of the community. So when I say you're choosing, between different options, what you're choosing is at different parts in the video will stop and it'll give you options in the headset of what you should do, how you should respond to that scenario.
Yeah,
Does that make more sense?
Yeah. Thank you for that. And my initial question was more around, let's say you have an officer that has an issue with a particular race, for example, and that person continues to avoid those trainings or potentially takes those trainings and doesn't do well in them. How are those handled? Have you ever had any of those?
I'll interject there, Kyle. Councilor Rivera, that's something that's going to be handled here internally within the police department. So it's not just going to be select whatever you want and choose the easiest scenario, choose your own scenario. As Kyle kind of mentioned, if we do this on a monthly basis, it's going to be managed by Deputy Chief Valdez and his training staff. Say, okay, everyone's going to go through scenario number 34 and number 36, and they're going to do those scenarios. As the training instructor or officer in that unit who's going to mandate and roll this out through all members of the police department, if they show that officer is intentionally goofing off or intentionally showing those biases and going right there and those prejudices, that's something that we deal with internally. It's something that the company wouldn't have to deal with. And if we show that the officers are either screwing around or they're just not grasping the training, they're failing it, then at that point, we would probably have to remove them from the streets and do remedial training with that officer and work with that officer and say, hey, here's the overall goal of the training. This is what we're trying to accomplish. And then work with that individual officer and that supervisor, and obviously as well review their work history to see if there's any patterns that we may have missed.
Counselor, if I can, it looks like the lieutenant has had his hand up, and Director Ochoa also has a hand up. I don't know if you wanted to comment on this question.
Yeah, I just want to hear from Kyle how the company itself handles those situations.
Okay, and then maybe we can go to our other two
Sure.
staff members.
Yeah, I would just say that what we're doing is building content, and in terms of like remediation and how the department is working with their officers, that's really up to the training staff in terms of how the policy and the best practices that they're developing within the agency.
All right, thank you. But you keep record of those situations, and if something ever happened, I assume you would have records to back the company up if something ever happened. Is that correct?
So there is a kind of like an after action report that you can choose to fill out if you would like to, where you can keep record of all the modules that the officers are going through and the coaching. So all of that is available to be stored as part of a training record for the officers.
Great, thank you.
Lieutenant and Director Ochoa, whichever order you all want to go in.
Yeah, I'll defer to Director Ochoa first.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clarify on the training that this module would enhance, not replace the existing crisis training that the police department currently undergoes, which is something we contract with Public Safety Psychology Group out of Albuquerque for. I actually just sat through the fire department's training recently from the same group that does crisis intervention training, and they bring in live actors, really raise your blood pressure also, and they're bringing in local people with local situations. And so we would see this as a really excellent in the field kind of enhancement for that existing training, just to clarify for members of the committee and the public.
Thank you. Lieutenant, you had something to add here too, I believe.
Yes, Madam Chair, Councilors. I also wanted to point out, I've been the point person on this project for quite a long time. And when it comes to the VR, one of the main selling points for us was that Axon is very responsive to feedback. And I made it clear that, or one of the questions I asked was, if we want to see a specific kind of, thing addressed, can they do that? And they can. So we did bring up English as second language, dealing with hearing impaired. They're very open to doing that and working with law enforcement. So we also brought up that it's not just New Mexico and Santa Fe, it's Los Angeles, it's Phoenix. All those areas are dealing with these things on a regional type of field. So they understand that stuff comes up, and they're very, very responsive. And I'd also like to bring up that they've actually quantified the retention of this training for the officers. So yes, it augments our crisis training that we already do, but they have figured out that retention is much higher with the VR training than it is with the classroom alone. And scenario where the officer, we know that, we're doing scenarios, but we know it's somebody that we know, and we know how they're going to react. Now with the VR training, it's much more different. I've actually put that headset on, and you're in it. I didn't think it was going to be, but it was very encompassing. It was a very strange feeling for me. So we're really excited, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle, the retention after a year for this training was 80% compared to, I think it was 20% for the classroom, or even less.
Yeah, that's correct, Lieutenant. 80% retention after 1 year of VR training, whereas you typically see 20% retention following just 1 week after a classroom setting.
Can you say more about retention? What do you mean by that?
Just the ability to recall like what you learned. And so from a virtual reality perspective, you see people being able to retain that content 80% a year later. Whereas, you've all been through all day PowerPoints and training of that nature, and it's really hard to recall more than just a couple nuggets throughout the day. And so we see with this virtual reality training, the ability for these officers to take things that they learned in their annual training and be able to pull that out when they need it on the street, weeks, months after they're going through these trainings.
Okay. I don't see any more hands. I do have a couple questions. How soon will this training be available in Santa Fe to our department?
I'll take it. Or Alan, go for it.
Well, do you mean the VR training?
Yes.
So, I mean, the way our timelines work, and Kyle, add info where necessary. Once we agree upon terms with the city, it's usually about a 8 to 10 week timeline to where we get our guys boots on the ground training up your guys. Shortly thereafter, Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, we would deploy the VR training, and you guys would have it in your hands along with everything else that you're buying in this bundle.
And so this is something, before the end of the year, the beginning of next year. What's the time frame?
Good question, Counselor. So typically we can ship all the gear and then have our people come on site, help you open the boxes, get everything uploaded into your account, and train all of your instructors on how they're going to be using it. We typically see about an 8-week turnaround from the time that we receive an executed contract until you are then ready to go roll out and train to your end users. So within a few weeks of the contract being executed, typically we are shipping all of the gear to you, and then shortly thereafter, we're on site with you, with your department, and training them up on it. So it would be within 1 to 2 months after the contract execution.
Okay, thank you. Can you talk a little bit about less lethal tasers and just the difference between what we have and what we're getting?
Yeah. Deputy Chief Valdez, is that something that you want to field, or would you like me
Yeah,
to?
and I don't know who to ask the question of, so whoever thinks.
Yes, Madam Chair, currently we field 2 devices. Of those 2 devices, one of them has been end of life for some time, so they no longer make it. The latest device we have is the X2. That one has been deployed with us since 2012. And it's also coming to the point where it's going to eventually get to end of life. So based on the technology that exists right now, we're looking at a system standpoint. So instead of just having things work individually, which we found through our evidence improvement project, it's not good to have things in silos. So this is a total system that's being deployed. It's the less lethal device, the in-car camera system, and the body-worn camera system. So they all work as a system together. The good thing about it is when people talk about the taser device, it is an alternative to using a higher level of force. The way we utilize that, again, is if we have someone that is in a situation where we can safely employ that device to, again, have a better outcome, we want to be able to utilize that device. But the question always comes about, well, what about the accountability? Is there a desensitization? Sorry, are people desensitized to utilizing that device versus other things, and is it going to be more prevalent? So there's a lot of concern with that. So what's great about this system is once that device is taken out of its carrier and it's taken off as safe, any camera device that's within proximity of it is going to be engaged. So we have that transparency, that accountability to say, here's what it's going to be. It also tracks how long in duration that device was utilized. So that's going to be that audit track, and it lets us track all that data. So if the question ever comes up in a use of force evaluation, or if there's a tort that comes forward, we can say this is when the device was deployed, this was the duration is deployed, and utilizing it as a system, we'll have the body cam and in-car camera video to go and document the situation so we can properly evaluate it. With our current devices, we do not have that capability to have that engagement. So that is a big reason why we're looking to get that upgrade. And again, just to get everyone the same device, because right now we have some people utilizing the X2. That is the one that was developed and deployed deployed for us in 2012. And then we have the X26, which was deployed back in 2006, which we still are utilizing out there in the field with our staff and is end of life. But with these devices, it is added to our options that we utilize, including impact munitions that we can use when the situation allows it to safely be utilized as an alternative to using a higher level force to resolve these situations. But the big thing we're looking for is that accountability, that audit track. That's what we really gain with going to the TASER 7 device. It's not about getting a new toy. It's not about getting a new thing to wear on your belts. It's utilizing this whole system. So it's all tracked, it's all accountable, and we're able to have those safeguards in place to make sure that it is properly being utilized. In addition to the camera system, it lets us know, are people utilizing the camera within policy, which is a huge thing now that we had State Bill 8 to come up, where it says all police officers have to use the camera for these situations. It has those audit tracks in there, lets us know. The camera also has other notifications if a camera has an error. For example, one thing that is prevalent with our current legacy system is the camera lens goes out of focus, or the microphone on the camera is not operating properly. When we find that out is when we do an inspection of the camera, or they have to go get video from an event, and that's when they learn of it. With the camera system, it sends those automatic notifications to us that there's an error with that camera. And if it does need to be replaced, Axon is sending that replacement in the mail so we can get it off the street and get it redeployed, so we do have an operating system that works. But with these less lethal devices, again, there are options to use as an alternative to using deadly force where it's safely able to be done.
Right.
That's the standpoint of the department. That's within our policy, and again, it's within again the Supreme Court standard, of objective reasonableness. And Alan, if you have anything else to add.
I would just say that with the new less lethal device, upon arming of it, it actually will activate the body camera so that it will tell you what the story was, as well as the prior 30 seconds leading up to that moment. Also, part of that new device, there's a what's called a warning arc, which is enough. Sight and sound of that arc can often be enough to de-escalate a situation without having to use it. And that's also very important. And that also would start a camera recording. So like DC was saying, it's all about accountability. The party was talking about staying within policy. We have a module within the system that actually will tell you which calls for service might be missing activations and which officers have a high or low activation rate with those cameras, and identify training opportunities within the department of who needs to be given extra training on when and how to use these things. So we've really taken it beyond just recording interactions and then storing it somewhere. It goes a lot more beyond that.
Yeah.
And Madam Chair, I'd like to also add, it has an option where we can set an alert to commanders and officers in the field. If a taser gets activated, we can actually see a live stream. So as well as the cameras coming on, it'll tell me that as a commander, hey, somebody out in the field just activated their taser. I can actually click on that camera and I can actually see what's going on live. So that is a huge thing for me also.
That's interesting. You're like the situation room at the White House. You can be anywhere and watching in real time.
Kind of, but the responding officers can see what's going on, and also commanders who normally don't get out, we can actually get that alert and see and say, we can, yes, it's kind of like Monday morning quarterbacking, but we can see how that officer's responding. And if we see an issue, we can address it immediately.
All right, so I find all of this very fascinating, but I'm not sure you answered my question, which is what makes this taser less lethal to the two outdated ones that we have? I get just guessing, I'm assuming that the technology is now better in the unit, therefore it's less lethal. I don't know. I mean, is it like a lower level of electricity? Is it I don't know. Why do you say less lethal?
Yeah, less lethal is synonymous with non-lethal. Essentially, tasers are deployed so that people don't lose their lives. And so it's not that it's comparing this model versus the previous model. It's just tasers in general are considered a less lethal or a non-lethal device.
Okay.
What I would add to just what are you getting with this model versus previous models, in addition to what was already said, is a big part of it just comes down to officer safety and community safety. The model that you guys have and the units that you have, a lot of them have been out on your streets for 10 to 12 years, and they all come with a recommended 5-year useful life. And so similar to your cell phones and your computers, you know, it's an electronic piece of equipment that wears out over time. And so what we are trying to do, and not only getting a better piece of technology that has better outcomes for your community members, but also we need to get new devices out there that are going to be reliable from being within that 5-year recommended useful life as well.
Yeah, okay, interesting. So less lethal is really a term of art in the spectrum of things that you can use in terms of weaponry. It's not to reflect that this is somehow different than its earlier versions in terms of the power that it emits when used, I guess is what you're telling me.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, interesting. Director Ochoa, you popped in. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, but you know, you're like Mary Poppins. You pop in, and I want to pay attention. So,
sorry, I'll stop that.
No. I'm glad you're here. I just want to make sure that I'm including you as needed. Let's see. Okay, so Senate Bill 8, state law. For people who may be watching who don't know, Senate Bill 8 required the use of body cams in police officers under certain situations across the state. I think that's a fair assessment. If you all want to add to that, fine. What I'm curious about, I'm a director on the Municipal League Board, and certainly smaller communities have been very concerned about this because they don't have the storage capacity to hold all the video that is recorded, and you know, that was going to be a huge investment in their infrastructure to make sure that they could you know, do right by the law and save the video. So curious, this contract, you all were storing the video. This is going to increase our capacity. We already had capacity. We're going to store it in the cloud versus somewhere else. Does this address anything for us? I don't, you know, we're a larger municipality than some of these communities that I'm aware of that we're struggling with this. Just if somebody could just speak to the video storage, I just out of curiosity.
I can speak to that, Madam Chair. So basically with this package, you get unlimited storage for anything captured on any of our devices. So you don't have to worry about, you know, a murder case you have to hold on to forever. We're there to back you up on that. I think previously with some of the smaller municipalities, we might have done a metered or set storage plan, and it became hard to manage and hard to predict. So we've essentially started moving everybody to these unlimited plans, just so you can take the burden of worrying about where this stuff is going to go, because you amass hours and hours of video. And if you have to worry about, well, where are we going to put it, and what are we going to, how should we categorize this so we don't keep it for too long? Yeah, that's the reason for the unlimited storage plan. Whereas currently you have it on-prem, so if you were filling up a server, you'd have to buy another one to then increase your storage capacity.
Okay, and then, so this came up last night about how that data is used. You don't contract to use that data in any way outside of how we might.
No, we don't do anything with your data.
So who owns that data? Do we own that data?
Your data, we're just housing it for you.
You're just housing it. So
that's in your agreement. Yeah. Very important to understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of important provision. Okay. I think that was all I had. Councilor Rivera, your hand is up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple follow-up questions. I heard Director Ochoa talk about a different type of training, and just wanted to know how it worked in conjunction with the training that we heard about tonight.
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, I'll let Chief Padilla talk about how the Santa Fe PD was very proactive with getting CIT training through the group I mentioned, PSPG, which, as you may know, the fire department is now contracting with as well, and how this would interact with the Axon for virtual reality training.
Yes, thank you, Director. Counselor, like I said, the initial 40-hour course that many of our officers, whether they're young or old or senior within the police department, went through that training in 2018, 2019. This year, through the fiscal budget, we added the funds in there to do the refresher training, 8 hours of refresher training. We began that training just last week. I know Deputy Chief Valdez went through it last week. I actually went through that 8-hour course just yesterday. It was down in Albuquerque at their classroom and their scenario. We conducted scenarios regarding a traffic jam, and the individual was frustrated because the other person cut him off. So it was a road rage incident. So you and that other fellow responding officer had to go out there and speak to him and empathize with that person and listen to them and understand their frustrations of what was going on, to try to convince that driver to get back into the vehicle, out of traffic, and then just carry on with the rest of their day and get home to the scenario or situation that they were dealing with. And then they have portable buildings where it's set up as a home, and you actually go into the home. And the scenario that I had to deal with was a child that had been abused by the mother. The mother wasn't home, and the mother was using some type of intoxicant, and possibly it was a child abuse, and used through the skills of speaking to the child, getting down on their level, and just that real life actors, and just de-escalating the situation, and just building those hooks to relate with that person and speak to them and get on their level and get that behind the scenes information to dig that information out of that child that not only did they have an argument with the mother and the mother wasn't home, but there was actually child abuse involved, and you had to kind of dig through that. So that was big bonus points if you were actually able to get to that end of that scenario and get that information with that child. But just listening all the way around nationally what the trends in law enforcement are interacting with individuals, whether it's suicide by cop or just speaking to a fellow officer who's in need and they're just dealing with their own personal crisis, whether it's the effects of COVID, whether it's financial strain. Did they recently get married? Did they recently have a child? Did they get divorced? Just learning all that empathy and self-reflection. It was great training. I said, I'm just fresh on it. Why? Because I just did it just yesterday. And that's something that our whole department is going through. And then as we hire newer officers or lateral officers, if they haven't been through that type of training here through New Mexico, we will be sending them through the full 40 hours.
So does that training work in conjunction with Axon? Do they complement each other? Is it just additional training, or somehow do they work together?
They do not work together. The officers, actually, when I went through the training yesterday, we're not in full uniform. We don't have our full duty belt on. It's not a hands-on training where you're going to deploy some type of a training device or go hands-on and tackle the person, pepper spray them, just using those basic de-escalation techniques and speaking to that individual and getting on their level and using that lowest level. Many officers, when we interview officers, verbalizing and the speaking skills, that's the number one skill that all law enforcement use on a day-to-day basis, whether they realize it or not. Everyone thinks they get into law enforcement and they have this duty belt with every doohickey in the world, whether it's a bola wrap and a pistol and a baton and any other thing that you could think of. What's used on a daily basis is just verbal commands and speaking to someone and not going in there with a perceived conception that I'm arriving on scene and that person is going to jail. No ifs, ands, or buts. That's not the way our police department works. And I'm sure there's some police departments that work that way, or individual officers. It's to get there and assess the own individual system. So Axon and the PSPG are not partnered together, nor do the virtual reality go hand in hand. That's true hands-on and dealing with those real life role actors as we did yesterday.
And Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, if I may add, I think to clarify, we would not see one replacing the other. That, as Chief Padilla mentioned, we have an 8-hour refresher course. I think the nice thing, my understanding about the virtual reality empathy training and crisis intervention or de-escalation training is that can be provided more easily. To do an 8-hour training down in Albuquerque for our staff, as you know, is a huge planning lift, and it's very different from being able to put on a VR headset in the station and refresh your skills in that way. So we see it as complementary.
Great, thank you. And then either for Chief Valdez or Lieutenant Strahan, I heard that the activation of the camera would be in relation to use of a taser. What about a duty weapon or just getting out of the vehicle? Is it tied into the taser, or is it tied into the vehicle itself, where if the vehicle camera is on, then the body camera is on as well?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera. So with those devices, you're able to put, they're called triggers on the vehicle. So if you come to a scene and you open up the back door on the passenger side for a transport, it'll have the pre-record for the devices. It'll engage both the body cam and in-car camera. What we're looking at is automation. One thing that we do see during tense situations or emergent situations, when officers get on scene, if they're going for an emergency call or for emergency call for assistance, they'll get out, they'll do their thing, then they'll realize, oh my goodness, I didn't turn on my body cam. And that's a big concern. So now once they come inside of that proximity, those triggers are in place and that can be engaged. They do have a device that you can utilize with a sidearm. That is something that we would look at to see if that's something we want to employ. And what that would be is once the device is unholstered, that is something we can look at. But on that side, I wanted to get some more information from that to see how does that trigger? Is it just gonna be for the duty sidearm? What about people that use different types of holsters? Those are conversations that we want to look at and something we may want to possibly T&E. And that could be something that maybe we look at down the road for this program. But one thing with the device though, that we did see during a critical incident is each one of these cameras, the body worn cameras, they are equipped with a gunshot detection device. So if an officer is out in the field and if either they utilize a firearm or if there's a gunshot detected coming inbound towards them in the general vicinity, it will activate that camera. It will send notification to that supervisor, let them know, hey, a gunshot's been detected. It is very unfortunate that we had to have that notification several weeks ago, but we do know the technology works and it gives us the location of that officer in the event that they are in need of assistance. If they're not able to radio they're needing assistance, that officer safety plan is going to help us, one, see what the situation is, two, give us the location of the officer so we can then provide them immediate medical attention if need be. So those are the things that they do have in there. Again, there's always improvements being made by Axon. So we expect that technology to continue to improve. And we're going to look at any way that we can utilize those types of benefits to improve what we do, to help with accountability and to let people know, hey, look, we're doing everything right by you. So we can demonstrate that. It's one thing to say it, it's another thing to prove it. We want to be able to prove that to people. Here's what we did, here's how we responded. And again, that camera is a third party that's not involved in the incident. That camera's there to capture from that perspective what occurred. So then we can see how can we improve, were things handled properly, or did we do the right thing and we need to stand here and say we did everything as best we could.
All right, Chief. So just briefly, when does the camera turn on automatically? One is with the taser.
Correct.
And when are the other ones?
So once with the taser device, that'll turn on the cameras automatically. That's through automation. If we have a trigger set up on the back passenger door for transport, it'll turn on and engage that camera through automation. If the emergency equipment on the vehicle is turned on, it'll turn on both the in-car camera device and the body-worn camera device. In addition to those, once the camera is activated, well, actually one more. If it detects a gunshot detection, it'll automatically turn off if it's not engaged. And then once all those are met, any of those situations, if an officer enters an area in proximity to another vehicle or camera that has been activated, that vehicle and camera will also be automatically activated once it gets in proximity of that scene.
And can an officer turn it off manually on their own? Can they override the automatic activation systems?
I think the only way they could do so is if it engages and if they would go through the normal process to then stop the recording. However, if another officer gets on scene, we can look at that. And if that is occurring, that would be something that would be flagged in the audit report that we would be looking at to see, hey, is this within policy? So if we see there's an officer that gets on a scene and they turn off their camera, but then we see with our logs, our call logs, that officer's on scene for 20 minutes, but there's only 2 minutes on that recording, that will flag that recording and say, hey, this may be out of policy. We review the situation and we can say, hey, look, the recording was not happening. Then we can address that deficiency through policy.
And the audit trail would show that the camera was activated via, let's say he turns on the light bar and camera comes on. And then 2 minutes later, it would say camera was stopped manually by the officer. So we would know, unfortunately, there's no way to prevent the manual stoppage of the camera, but we would know that he stopped it before his call was done. And they would, you guys would know something was wrong.
And just one more thing to add, the function to start recording it manually and to end recording manually are two separate button functions. Currently for our camera, it's the same button function. So if someone's thinking they're turning on their camera, they may actually be turning it off with our current legacy system. Within the design that Axon has, it prevents those situations from occurring. So it is very deliberate when they're started the recording. It's very deliberate when they end the recording manually.
And just to explain what those actions are, it's a double tap to start and a hard press for 3 seconds to stop. So very different motions.
Okay. And then do you, are there policies and procedures, I guess, that you would respond to certain calls without activating the emergency lights? Are there situations, maybe domestic violence or other things where you wouldn't activate the light system and therefore not activate the camera system?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, if it's one of those situations where they have to manually engage the camera, that is required by policy for certain types of calls they respond to. So anytime there's a person contact, our staff by both state statute and by policy are required to engage that camera device. Now, if we find that someone is not following that policy, again, it's addressed internally. If there's situations where it would require the engagement of emergency equipment, that starts the equipment all on its own through automation. But there still is a responsibility on our staff members to be within policy and within law to engage with cameras for every person contact that they have, because that is what they're required to do.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this item. Can we get a roll call, Jamie Ray?
Councillor Cassett,
Yes.
Councillor Villarreal,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Did you ask Councilor Rivera, or did I not hear it?
I did ask him. Right?
No, I think you asked Councilor Garcia twice.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Councillor Rivera.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so that is the end of what we've pulled from consent. We have no action items for discussion tonight. Are there matters from staff? Jamie Ray, do you have anything?
Madam Chair, I do not.